Writing is about the process. It's about listening and recognizing remnants of your story in the stories of others. When we share our stories with each other, we share the resonance of the human experience. The By Firelight podcast is your invitation to join our circle, a circle of writers, poets, seekers, and storytellers as we capture our living in words. This multifaceted living with joy, grief, love, growth, and loss is shared among us in your legacy, your story. The things you choose to do with your days as they unfold matter here. I'm your host, Betsy Delzer. I'm many things, but in this gathering, I'm a painter, poet, and writer, and I'm honored to be your guide through these episodes. Together, we'll find our muses in the rich and heart-expanding conversations with incredible guests, many who are like minds and all outrageously inspiring hearts. When you press play, you're here in the circle to share this space with us. By Firelight.
Sara Alvarado is a writer, entrepreneur, and fierce advocate for racial justice in real estate who believes that the way to handle challenges in life and business is to show up authentic, bold, vulnerable, and always ready for fun. Sara's published her first memoir, Dreaming in Spanish, an unexpected love story in Puerto Vallarta in 2023. She's also the author of the Racial Justice Toolkit for Real Estate Professionals, a guide for change agents. And she's the creator of the Conversation Challenge, helping white people talk about race. Sara's the co-founder and director of Own It, Building Black Wealth, a groundbreaking initiative working to increase generational wealth in Black communities through home ownership. Through her speaking and workshops, Sara creates awareness and inspires change with her straight talk and loving ways. She spent 20 years as a real estate broker, and her husband, Carlos, now leads their team, the Alvarado Group, at Compass. Sara's a lover of love, spirit, dance, and adventure, with the music turned up, and enjoys family fun, traveling, challenging the status quo, and writing. Sara Alvarado, I'm so excited that you're here today.
Hey, Betsy.
You know, before we even really get started, I'd love to ask, what would your older or younger self want to tell us today?
Oh, well, today I feel like childlike wonder is what my both younger and older self would love to remind me and everyone that it doesn't have to go away when we get older. Like childlike wonder is like the most beautiful gift that we can have every day when we wake up.
I love that. We can carry that intention into our conversation for sure. What were you like as a kid? Were you full of wonder?
I definitely was in the clouds a lot, sat in the back of the classroom and looked out the window, and imagination galore. That's how I was like at school. I struggled at school. I have ADHD, which I, didn't know until last year. So school was not my jam. And I had a rebel streak, definitely, growing up, for sure. Mm-hmm. Hardcore.
Yeah, that comes out. That might come up in our book discussion in a moment. But let's give people a little bit of a framework. Did you grow up in the Midwest, or what was your background and upbringing like?
I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. Parents, white, middle class. Mom was Jewish. Dad was raised Catholic. And I was in Madison until 18, and then I left. So I had a decent, I don't know how to really label childhood. It's complicated.
It is complicated.
A lot of privileges. I grew up with a lot of unearned privileges.
One of the things that I feel like is one of our initial connection points, and also a way that you're really well known, at least in this area, if not beyond this area, is in addressing some of those privileges and kind of activating in yourself and the people around you. That has also gone into your professional life. So aside from being a writer, can you talk a little bit about the work that you've done in real estate? Because I think it's really inspiring and expansive.
Sure. My dad was in real estate growing up, so I definitely had, the real estate path set up in front of me. It was never something I dreamed of doing, and it was more of a backup plan. And so I ended up in Mexico when I was around 24, 25. That's where I met my husband. And actually in college in Minneapolis, I had a side job as a leasing agent. It wasn't like real estate, but it was in the real estate world, right? And then when we moved to Madison, our youngest son was 18 months and I needed to work because Carlos was getting his green card, but I hadn't worked in a while because I'd been living in Mexico. So nobody really was hiring me. And I ended up getting my real estate license. How I describe it as a backup plan per se. Like I needed to pay the bills and feed the kid and et cetera, et cetera. So I got into real estate at that point and ended up doing really, really well. And then Carlos and I ended up starting our own brokerage in 2008. At that point, we were really busy selling houses and raising the kids. And I didn't grow up with an understanding of racial justice, racial profiling, understanding white. I understood other cultures. I understood racism. And I was raised colorblind. You know, my parents were definitely like they had busted through the religion discriminatory viewpoints per se, and, you know, like the marrying outside of your religion. And they were all about, they were hippies. They were like, you love whoever, it doesn't matter what color your skin is, what religion, etc. So it was not a shock that I fell in love with a Mexican man. It was never really a discussion. And I never understood my whiteness in it all, right? Like there's an appreciation for culture and an ignorance around who I was as a white person and how I showed up in the world. I go into a lot in the book because that's, you know, it was hard to ignore as a white person living in Mexico and having a baby. But in real estate in Madison, I didn't see it until around 2014. And I actually didn't even see that in the real estate aspect until later, like 2019. I know you just asked me one question, but it's hard to just answer that one question without telling a bunch of backstory. So yeah, I got really good at real estate and then I started learning about whiteness and racial justice, and I started getting involved in racial justice work in Madison. I had a woman who was working for me, and she pulled me aside one day and she was like, "Hey Sarah, I see you doing all these amazing things in the community around racial justice and talking about biases and white privilege, but I don't see it in your company." And I was like, yeah, I don't know how to desegregate neighborhoods. I don't know how you do that, right? And that's how the system works. You know, it makes it seem like it's too big to address. And then you just feel helpless and there's nothing you can do. And she really worked with me. That was back when, you know, it wasn't all over in terms of disparity statistics as much as it is now. But there were books, there were articles, there were podcasts. So I just did a deep dive. And at that point, once you see it, you can't unsee it. One of the things we wanted to do was contribute financially to Black and Brown homeownership directly. And that's not as easy as it sounds based on a lot of, I don't know how much you want to get into the weeds, but we ended up creating a down payment fund. And this is not just me. It was working with a number of super smart people in Madison. So, you know, we got together with a lot of other smart people. It took a while, but yeah, now I'm a co-founder of Own It, Building Black Wealth. And we've helped 18 families get into homes. The new down payment grant is $19,000 and there's an education program. And, you know, we're trying to change the system of real estate from within and do the work. And it's hard.
Yeah. There's so many things to like sort of congratulate and applaud about this whole process, but I'm thinking about that moment when somebody comes to you and just calls you in around your company and the work that your company is doing. To think of going from that point, right, to the point of sitting around tables with the other smart people, the other brilliant people that you're able to kind of pull in, because that's what is really necessary, you know, is to kind of look at what do I have to offer and where can I lean in? And then where can I, you know, kind of collaborate and make this a collective. That is so empowering, Sarah. I think that you went from hearing that feedback to this place of having this money available and 18 families, you know, it's incredible. When you think about somebody listening who is like, whew, that just feels so like daunting or overwhelming, there is a way to, I mean, it didn't all happen overnight. You mentioned a number of years of this happening and building out your network and kind of reaching out, reaching in. What encouragement would you have for somebody who might kind of feel that helplessness that you mentioned initially?
A community, like who are the people in your community? So, in some spaces, there is a right and a wrong way of doing racial justice work. And I think that is a red flag. So if you're doing it wrong, that's where there is the tenet of white supremacy culture in terms of there is a right or a wrong, right? So if I am not doing something in a way that's helpful or that serves, or if I'm doing something that's harmful, it can be changed, right? We can walk that path. But if I automatically go to I'm doing it wrong, it's me wanting to be perfect, and it's me wanting to be really seen as good. So it's hooked into perfectionism. And I think one of the reasons that it's so easy for me to be okay with making mistakes is because my mom, huge shout out to my mom. She was always like, you are amazing. And if you make a mistake, you are not the mistake, right? Like you're not bad. Maybe you did something that wasn't great that you're going to need to recover from or need to repair, but you're amazing and you're wonderful and you're perfect in your imperfections. And then striving for being better, but not because I think I'm bad. Being better because that's who I want to be. Like I love to be better, but it doesn't mean that I'm not good enough right now. It's humility, right? It's taking the ego out of it. It's being able to be wrong. It's being able to make mistakes. It's being able to not know enough. And that's where you bring all the people in who know more. Like, okay, I don't know how to do this. Who does know how to do this? Who has more information? And I think, growing up, I was pegged pretty but dumb. So I never really thought of myself as smart, which means that I always liked to surround myself with smart people, which is a pretty smart thing to do. So I do know that I am smart. But when you grow up like that, you don't feel like you have access to it. What I would say is find the people that believe in you, that love you, that trust you, really that love you no matter what. And Carlos, no matter what, he knows that if I make a mistake, he's going to still be there, or I know he's going to still be there. And having those people, because when you do take risks, you're going to make a mistake. And you can either play it safe and then be complicit and then be part of the problem, or you can take some risks and try and be part of the solution and know that it's not going to be easy. And then who are your people?
Yeah. Yeah. Aside from knowing who your people are, it sounds like your mom embedded in you the combination of love and belief in yourself, that you could be flawed and loved at the same time, that wasn't sort of laden with shame or guilt or some of the heavier things that can come. One of the roads I would love to go down is your mom, because I'd love to honor her in our time. There was a period in time when I feel like I started reading your writing actually on Facebook, and it was it 2023, at the kind of the last weeks of your mom's life. And what I really loved and like really found so endearing, Sara, was I was engaging with Facebook on such an artificial or shallow level. I felt like I was going on and I was reading about, people's puppies and anniversaries and birthdays. And it was just like kind of a highlight reel of people's lives. And then all of a sudden you had this really, I will say, I mean, it was almost a magical feeling for me, because I felt like I was with you. I felt like I was engaging as if I was like, especially when you would post pictures like of holding her hand or of, the side of her face or things where it pulled me right viscerally into the experience of those last days. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what that was like for you to capture, like to live it and experience it, but also to capture it in writing and share it with us.
Yeah, I love writing. So for me, it's a healing process. So I was doing it for myself. I wasn't, I didn't feel, and then obviously there are some points where it feels like people were waiting to know like what was going on. So my mom was on her deathbed for 18 days. It was a really, really long time. And I think during that time I went through all of the roller coaster of like the first 4 days I remember, because she had a stroke. And before she had a stroke, let me just clarify that, she'd been living in an assisted facility, assisted living or memory care facility. It's an amazing home for people. And she couldn't talk and she couldn't walk. And like they had to use that thing to move her from the bed to the wheelchair. So she was like there, but not there. Right. You know, when people are like, oh, but at least you still have your mom. And I wanted to be like, fuck you. Like, this is not really my mom. And yet it totally is. So when she had the stroke, I thought it would be like, you know, a week. So like the first 4 days, I'm like superstar. I'm at her bed every day. Like I'm dressed and I shower to go help my mom die. You know, like this is my job and I'm taking it super seriously. And I'm like reading the flyers and hospice is there. And then after day 4, I crashed. I was like, what? Okay, this, you know, this could go on. I think something shifted and she maybe they said something like this might be a while or something. And then there's other, you know, like family dynamics more very complicated. People don't like to talk about family dynamics a lot when your family members on their deathbed and dying. And so I went on the roller coaster and it was raw and and I knew that it was going to be one of the most important, influential, impactful times of my life. I mean, my mom and I are super close. We've had many lives together. She's just an amazing human. And so I think I was just very awake for all of it. And it was helpful for me to share it too, because I knew other people had experienced it. And people are hungry to talk about death and dying. You know, it's something that is so sacred and beautiful. And so to be with someone as they're actively dying is a huge gift to me and to her, right? Like I could tell it was something that was important to her to have us there, but also for me to be there. Like there was no other place in the whole world that I wanted to be. And then there would be moments where I was like, I can't be here anymore. You know, like how do you, and all of those feelings of, I don't want to be here, but I don't want to be anywhere else. I'm so sad. And I'm also experiencing laughter and joy and gratitude. Like, how do you balance all of that? Because it's not something that I feel like our culture really creates space for. You know, like you should be sad. You should not want her to die. You should, you know, and then I'm finding myself feeling like, when is she going to die? Why isn't she dying? And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a terrible person. And then I'm like, but I'm not, you know, like, so all of the things.
Yeah, holding the two hands, right? The one hand is the readiness and the willingness to release her to the other side, and then also the holding of the grief and the present moment of knowing that loss. Yeah, there's so much in there. I think about death. I think it comes up a lot on this podcast because writers think about it as well. One of the fictional things I did a long time ago, I think in my early 30s, was write a fictional obituary for myself. And so you actually go through the process of writing up, you know, the real up until the age that you are, and then imagining this long life ahead. So imagining, you know, maybe the length of your mother's life or my mother's life. My mom's 82, and kind of writing the story out. And I did two versions, and I did two versions to see if there was one that was a little more true for me. I was trying to make some life decisions, career wise and relationship wise, and it was a fascinating process to sort of meditate on my own potential story and then share it even with the people that were closest to me at the time, and like sort of get vetted out with some ideas. And even I remember being in like a talk therapy session and being like, so I wrote my obituary, which, right, it's like comes off as really alarming, right? It's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, well, it was part of a creative writing webinar I was in, and I just thought it was interesting, right? So, you know, did you meditate on like what her death would be like or passing would be like? You know, was there a readiness that you kind of got yourself in a state of or for?
So what happened was she went into a facility in November of 2019. And then she moved into the place where she ended up dying in January of 2020. And at that point, she was very physically healthy, right? Like her mind was definitely deteriorating. The Alzheimer's was very much in effect, but she was dancing, like she was physically very healthy. And then COVID hit. And so, it's like April, May, June. I don't know exactly what part of COVID we were in when all of a sudden I was like, oh, if she dies, I might not be there. And I had never consciously said out loud, like, I'm going to be with my mom when she dies. I guess it was just an assumption. Like, of course I'll be with my mom when she dies because we'd been so close. So I think I just always thought that, but it's never something that we had ever talked about. Like, I guess I had imagined us sitting vigil with her or something. And so then during COVID, I was really upset. Like when I all of a sudden realized, what if I'm not like, and then I tried imagining what would it be like for me not to be with her? Oh my God, this is going to make me cry because I was so upset about it, right? Like I was like, I can't imagine not being with her. And I did I think I had some sort of energy reading with a woman, and she was like, your mom knows that you're with her. Like if you're not physically with her, it's going to be okay. Like she kind of talked me through what it would be like if I wasn't with her, which is kind of a weird thing maybe for people to do, except that I'm super close with my mom and it was COVID and everyone was thinking about people dying and, that was the time. So, fast forward to 2023, I guess I had enough time thinking about what her death would be like. And so then to be able to be with her, was just it's just the greatest gift. It's such a special, sacred time.
Do you read the accounts that you wrote at that time ever?
I haven't recently, and they make me cry. And when I think about the day she died, I definitely, I could easily cry on that day because it was just such a, like when those things happen, you just remember every single detail. And so for me, I had been training for this dance competition, which I had said yes to in June. And then she had the stroke in the end of July. And I really could have just dropped out at that point. The dance competition was in September. And I ended up, because my mom was a dancer, I was like, this is what she wants me to do. And to go from her deathbed to the dance studio, back to her deathbed, it felt like such a important process for me to be in my body and enjoy and dancing, that I knew that was what I was supposed to be doing, even though it felt like the last thing that I should be doing. And I actually had a class, a training session the day she died. And like, those are the things you just you can't forget. Like you remember, like I remember going out to the car and, I'm getting text messages from the caretaker and they were, you're literally waiting for every single update on her breaths per minute and all of these things. So I actually wasn't with her. She died while I was driving there. And I don't think she wanted me there. I think it was honestly the most perfect thing because when I got there, she had passed like 10 minutes earlier. And so when I entered the room, I got to open the window and like this gush of wind, like just swooshed into the whole entire room. And so I'm looking at her and she's dead on the bed, but like I literally feel her coming through the window. And it was just such an amazing, and then I got to just physically like hold her face and she was still warm. I hope this isn't like tripping people out, but it literally was everything I needed to feel close to her and to like support her and to support myself. Yeah. I loved her life so much. And I loved how she died. Like I loved how she is now as a spirit guide for me. Like I love all of it.
Do you find yourself talking to her just like you always did?
Yeah. Sometimes I get mad because I feel like she's not as loud as I want her to be. And other times she's like very loud. So yes, we have a great relationship. I think one of the cool things about when a person dies is that I think a lot of people feel like the relationship is over and it continues to grow because we continue to grow, right? So like as I experience new things, my relationship with my mom changes. And I always felt like I knew that when she died that I would just continue to have her. So I wasn't like grieving that that would be over. It was more of a curiosity, like, okay, what's it going to be like for us, mom? Like, how do we get to play together? How do we, how are you going to be able to support me? How are you going to take care of me when I'm sick? Like,
oh, there's so much tenderness there. And thank you so much for going there with me. We had talked a little bit in advance of the podcast of like, we love talking about death and we love talking about angels and guides. And, I think for the common listener of this podcast, that is something that is on the minds of many people. And also if it's not, right, like I'm happy to host the space where it can be. I think the concept of love continuing and changing and even growing post death is a really beautiful idea if it's not something that people are sort of dwelling on yet, So I'd also love, we have this book here. I have a copy of it right here. And there's so many things and ways we could engage with you being a memoirist. But I just remember watching it sounds like your own kind of public relations and marketing pitch that you created and then lived out for yourself. Because as I was watching you launch your book into the world, there was so much built anticipation. And I was just so excited for you. I think that was something that was very like part of our community, just people feeling really happy for you and excited for you. And there was such celebration and there was a lot of life force, I think collective life force, which seems to be a real theme in your life. And then I asked you out for drinks or lunch or something. And I was just like, hey, tell me about this. Like, I just want to learn about your process way before this podcast came to be. So I'd love to just dive in a little bit about your storytelling and process of writing your memoir, wherever you want to start with that. Like, I know now it's been, how long has it been? A couple years that it's been out? Yeah. 2?
Yeah. It'll be 2 years in March.
So where would you like to start with telling us about that process?
Well, I always wanted to write a book. So I always wanted to be a writer. And, I was one of the people that felt like you don't make a living doing that. It's kind of one of those big pipe dreams. And I didn't realize how much you can be a writer without publishing. And I wish I would have embraced the writer's life more. So I journaled and journaled and journaled until I had Alex, my first kid. And then maybe like for a year, less than that, after he was born, I would journal, but it was all like, 2 minutes on left boob, 1 minute and 30 seconds on the right boob, and then 2 hours of sleeping. Like it was just so the little baby stages, and like there was no space for me. Like I actually didn't know how to create space for myself as a mother, period. And journaling just disappeared completely. So it wasn't until 2013 that I started journaling again. So I had about 12 years of no, just writing emails in terms of my writer's life. And then it just was came with a full passion of like, I want to write. So I started blogging. I didn't know what the story was that wanted to come out of me. I struggled for years. Like I would start one book and then I would shelve it and then start another one and then shelve it. I think not having clarity was really hard. I wanted someone to tell me what to write. And then sometimes people would, and then I would start writing it and then I would get mad because I was like, this isn't it. And then there was July of, I want to say 2020. And I had an astrological reading. And at that point I was in the middle. I was 40,000 words into a different book. And I was like, no, in having this reading, it was very clear that I needed to tell this story of the year 2000. And that once I told that story, then I can tell more stories, but I needed that one to come out first. And the reason I had been resisting it was because it didn't make sense based on my business trajectory, like in terms of like writing a love story about when I went down to Mexico and was struggling with sexual trauma and alcohol and drugs and addiction. Like it didn't fit into what the life I was living in 2020. And I do love business. And so I was like, well, and it doesn't feel good to me, but I guess also I'm a rebel and sometimes you just do what you need to do. And if this is what's calling me, I have to trust it. So that's kind of when I stopped everything and created space for this specific story to come out exactly the way it did. And then it took 6 months to write the first draft. And I was just like, it, I love it. I love everything about the book. I love the cover. I love the title. I love the process. I loved the people that helped me. I love the community that I built. It was really hard. There were definitely lots of hard moments writing it. I loved my therapist in supporting me through it. Yeah, I'm really proud of it. And it was the weirdest thing was how proud of myself I felt for an extended period of time. You know how sometimes you do something and you're proud of yourself and then life goes on. You know what I mean? Like I kept on feeling proud of myself.
I think that's a beautiful experience, especially knowing your humility. It's like the pride can exist of feeling I'm really proud of this, like the gestation and birth of this creative act that also is representational of, I'm a character in the story, my loves, my family members, my friends, etc. So the book's title, I haven't even said it yet. It's Dreaming in Spanish. You decided to start it kind of in that like rock bottom, I also, for lack of a better phrase, right, phase of your life in kind of the ages of becoming. So how did you decide to start there?
That's where I wanted to start. That's where it felt right to start. And actually the first, like I start as I'm on the plane flying to Mexico. So I was taking steps forward into wanting to change my life. So it wasn't necessarily rock bottom. And, there were frames of thought like, well, you shouldn't start there. But that's where I wanted to start. So that's where I started.
Did that journey to Mexico, I mean, obviously that it was like the pivot of your story, right? That's where you met Carlos. How long were you actually there in Mexico?
So I flew down December 15th of 1999. So it was, 2 weeks before Y2K and everyone was freaking out about it. And I ended up meeting Carlos at the end of January of 2000. And within the first week of meeting him was also the first AA meeting that I ever went to. And so the first 4 or 5 months was really me trying super hard to be someone I wanted to be, but I didn't know who that was and I didn't know how to be that person. And then I fell in love with Carlos, which was completely unexpected. And spoiler alert, I got pregnant. So that was one of the surrender moments. That was the surrender moment, was really like, okay, I can have all the plans in the world and clearly it's not up to me. I have no idea what this life is supposed to be like. I don't know what I'm supposed to, like, so I'm here. I surrender. Whatever God you want to do with me, clearly this is your plan. I would have never picked this. I don't feel ready. I don't know what I like. I don't feel mother. Like, it was just like the furthest thing from, I don't have insurance. I'm like, living in a studio apartment in a foreign country. I just met this guy. My parents don't even know him. Like there was a huge list of why this didn't make any sense. And it made perfect sense in a way that was like, okay, I'm here. I'll just keep stepping forward into whatever life you have planned for me. So that is what I use really throughout my whole life. Every time something felt out of control or uncertain, like it doesn't really matter because whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And I'm going to keep showing up and I'm going to keep serving and surrendering because I've done it before and I can do it again. And needing to control kind of gets in my way.
Yeah. When you say meeting and falling in love with Carlos wasn't expected, do you remember kind of what you did expect at that time?
Well, I mean, I was hating on men, period. Full stop. Like, don't want a boyfriend, not interested. But he was a soulmate, I guess. I know that sounds cheesy, but we were supposed to be together. So we fought that. Like he had a restaurant, and his restaurant was his baby, and it was like took everything. He didn't have time for a girlfriend, and I was trying to take care of myself, and wasn't interested in having a boyfriend. So when I say unexpected, like we were actively like, we really shouldn't, like, this isn't what either of us want. And we can't deny that this is what's up.
Yeah, like this magnetism between you. And that, I think,
Yeah.
one of the most beautiful parts of the story, and continues to be, like post publishing, is like present day, is this really deeply like trustworthy love that you have, that you're soulmates, or that you are, meant to be together.
I think we also are very intentional about choosing our marriage and choosing each other. And we also believe in divorce. And I think going into marriage, believing in divorce was a game changer. It created a space for us to have conversations like what's working, what's not working. And if something's not working, should we change it? Should we look at it? Should we put it under a microscope? Should we set it on the table for a little bit and see what happens? Should we go dancing? Like how do we want to be? And who do we want to be? And he was the one that really introduced me to we make up the rules. I tell this story in the book where, we got into a fight at one point and I called him an asshole. And he was like, "No, I'm out. Like, this isn't how I do things. I don't want to be in a relationship like that." And I was like, "Well, this is just how relationships are. Like my parents swear at each other all the time. It's not a big deal." And he was like, "Yeah, but I don't want it. And we get to choose." And I was like, "What?" Like, wait, okay. Like I literally was like, we get to choose. So then what do we want it to be like? Like, how do we want it to be? And our relationship has changed, obviously. We've been married almost 25 years and we have 2 kids, and I changed. I think I never wanted to get married because I couldn't understand how people change together. I'm like, that actually doesn't make sense. I'm going to change a ton. Humans change. How would you expect to change together? And I think what obviously I've learned is that we can support each other in how we change, and our love and our support and our cheerleading for each other is what is like the glue of it, right? Like that's what makes it, we're for each other.
Have you mutually evolved like in similar directions? I mean, here you mentioned having this real estate group and kind of creating a brokerage together. And so there's like a parallel of like working life and then parenting life. And, is that something that you feel like, I'm just curious, from a love story that feels like it's got energy and magnetism, what is that like in the evolution process together?
Part of it is respecting who we are as people, and we're so different. We aren't the same at all. And so I think just allowing ourselves to be so different, and because he is a Virgo and steady and stable and grounded, and I am a risk taker and I have a lot of air, I have a lot of Gemini in me, I'm more emotional and extroverted. He sees that, he supports that, and then I support him. Like we don't shame each other for, right? It's more like, I love this about you and you love this about me. And so I'm going to obviously grow in different ways. I aspire to do things that he would never really be interested in. Like he's a private person. He's like, would never write a book, right? But he was the main supporter of me writing the book. Like he saw how much I wanted it. And so that became something that was important to him for me. So we definitely have evolved as humans. I think spiritually, we always want to be growing together. I think that's where we're matched really well. And that's where we challenge each other in terms of how we want to live and how we want to have faith and how we want to support each other is through our spiritual growth.
All right. So back to the book for just a moment. You said you did it in 6 months. I mean, did you like just take some time off of your other job? Did you carve out, were you like a 4 a.m. kind of get up and write kind of writer? Like, what was that like?
Oh, I love this question. So I think one of the reasons I was so proud of myself for writing the book is because I do have ADHD and I never thought I would be able to finish it. I was like, maybe I'm just a blogger. Like, how do you finish a whole book? Like, it just is so daunting at so many different points. So in the beginning, what I did was I'm going to call her a coach, Susanna. She's an editor, but she supported me as a coach in that time period where I promised her 10,000 words once a month. And so I delivered on that for 6 months, and she taught me to write forward. So I would deliver the 10,000 words and then she would read them and she would give me some feedback, but I was never allowed to go backwards. I just kept writing forward, which is interesting because then taking a lot of what her feedback was, the second half of the book was way better than the first half of the book. So just in editing it, like it was a different experience after that. It's really the process of just vomiting the whole story. So just everything, and not to think about it, not to question, not to stop and research, but just to keep going. So that was my method for that, getting the first draft out. And after I wrote the first draft, which isn't anything like the final version, obviously, but there was a really proud feeling after that, like a huge accomplishment. Like it's crappy, but I got it all out. So that was the first draft. And then she encouraged me to take a class with Michelle Wilgden, who also is her partner at Madison Writer Studio. And that class was called the Second Draft. And there were 5 people in the class, and you bring your manuscript to them and everyone has a chance to read it and then, give feedback, etc. That was incredibly scary. That was the first time I had anyone reading it besides Susanna, really. So that was that second. Yeah, that was terrifying. I don't really want to have to do that again.
Oh, well, before I'm always interested in fear and what makes something scary, but I'm also curious, when it's writing forward, did you write in a linear way? Like, did you go from that first story?
No, I wrote and then I would and then so I think my first draft was maybe, let's say, 20,000 words of getting us to one point. And then I all of a sudden was like, oh, wait, I need all of this backstory. And so then I probably had like this huge chunk of backstory. And maybe I had other chunks. I don't remember, but I had to rework it because the actual final draft, there's a lot of back and forth in the first 100 pages. It's like, that's the structure of it. And I definitely didn't have that in the first draft at all. And I didn't even know it was a love story. I didn't know what the arc was. It wasn't until like the 5th or 6th draft where Susanna was like, Sarah, this is a love story. And I was like, what? A love story? She was like, yeah, it's a love story. And that's when I fell in love with it being a love story. Because it's a love story with myself first. And then obviously it's a love story with my husband, but there's a love story with my mom throughout the whole book too. Like, that's very apparent.
Absolutely. So you said it was the 6th draft that this becomes like, this is a love story. And then that is the moment where the arc appears to you. Is that right?
I think it was maybe in my head at that point more of a recovery story, but that never really felt right to me because the second part of the book really does go into, a lot of white privilege and what it's like to be in a multiracial relationship with a baby in a different, like there's a lot of other stuff that happens. So I think it just, if anything, gave me some clarity, and it felt more in alignment with what I didn't know I hoped for.
Okay. I'm asking some of these questions because I, interestingly, have had a couple of conversations with memoirists recently, and it just seems like everybody has their own process of like piecing together, whether it's kind of jumping in with a specific memory and just capturing that, toggling back and forth, and then allowing the editing process to pull it all together or to like illuminate that arc. Was the process of writing it and working through it therapeutic for you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, at first it was like I wanted to make sure that my kids knew the real story, because I think it gets, because there was a lot of trauma for me and the recovery part of it, not just in terms of, sexual violence that I had survived, but addiction stuff. And so like the beginning of our relationship was not easy. And Carlos and I are very easily, like we're just a very loving, happy couple. So I feel like I don't like the Instagram filter that takes away from how hard it really is to be in relationship and to fall in love and to find yourself and like all of those points where kids struggle. I just wanted them to know what it was really like. And then I also wanted them to know what it was like for us in the very, very beginning, navigating his family and my family and language barriers. So I wanted that to be written. And then I didn't realize how much, and I had been through plenty of therapy already, but I didn't realize how much more therapy I would need throughout the writing process. There were a couple of scenes where there was one scene specifically where a beta reader wrote on the side, I think this is more than what you're making it. I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was kind of like, you might want to check in on this part a little bit more. And I went, into the therapy office and I was like, all right, let's talk about this. And yeah, there was some stuff that I had, been diminishing to some extent in terms of what my real experiences were and how much that impacted me. And so that's when you just pause. You pause on the book because it's not about how quickly you get it done. It's how well you take care of yourself through the process. It's you write for yourself and for healing, and you edit for the reader and the experience. And I was still in the writing stages of it, right? So that was an opportunity for me to be like, okay, this is for me and I'm doing this for me. And there is no finish line or timetable on healing. It's just a process. And then creating grace for myself, allowing grace.
I was recently talking to a scholar of writing offline, not in this podcast, and she was talking about the reliability of a narrative and like the reliability of being a storyteller. And it really got me thinking as I'm talking to so many writers these days about the kind of soul searching or the soul elements that might come along with that concept. Was that in your mind at all around like my own reliability as telling the story or presenting these people as characters? Did that come up through your groups or coaching or anything like that?
Like, how reliable am I as a storyteller? I had journals. I think what I would have done differently is I would have played with creative nonfiction more. I got a little rigid around, well, this happened and this happened and then this happened and then this happened. And so that is what happened and that's what needs to be told in that way. And it wasn't until I don't know what draft it was, but there were way too many drunk scenes. How many drunk scenes do you need, right? But they each had different aspects of like a moment of clarity or something. And it was recommended that I combine two drunk scenes into one. And I was like, you can do that? It's like, well, it's true. I mean, maybe that didn't happen on that night, but it did happen. So what is real and what is helpful that made it a little bit more like the creative aspect of writing, even though. So I'm not really answering your question. I feel like a very reliable storyteller because I had so much actual data from my journals and letters and emails that the story felt very, very reliable. And I guess there were parts of it where what really tripped me out was what's my story to tell, because I tell my parents' story as well as it impacted me. So like their relationship impacted my story, and that's my story to tell and how I received it, lived through it, etc. But that part, there's definitely lines where I'm like, hold on a second, what is mine and what isn't mine here, and what is for the story. So that took a lot of work.
Sounds like a deep internal process as you're externalizing, right? All right, so we are 2 years out almost from publishing and promoting and putting it out there. And that was, like I had mentioned, just such a fun party to watch and be a part of. Is there any advice you'd have for somebody who's in that place where you were, maybe they've already started something, but it doesn't feel quite right, or they're thinking about it. What do you tell the people who are like, I'm thinking about this, but maybe they're overwhelmed, or they're like, hey, I've got ADHD. I don't know if I can knock this out. Like, what words of encouragement or advice do you have?
How bad do you want it? That was the Post-it note that I had on my computer. Like, if you want something, you'll make it happen. You asked me what my process was in terms of, did I wake up, every day at the same time? It sounds like when you're talking to lots of other writers, everyone has their own process. And so, like, how do you actually find your process? So for me, I would copy other people's processes, and then I would track, like, does it feel right? Does this work for me? Does this not work for me? Because I know that how you do it isn't maybe how I'm going to do it, but how somebody else does it might like, there might be a piece of that works for me, and there might be a piece of what you do that works for me. So it's really my job to be listening to myself. So as I practice getting up at the same time every day and writing from the same desk with the same situation or whatever, and then monitoring, like, how do I feel? Does this work for me? Does this not work for me? Oh, this isn't working for me. Okay, it works for them. Great. This doesn't work for me. So now I'm going to try something else, because I want this book out in the world so badly. And I believe I have it in me. And so it's a matter of figuring out what is my process, and then trusting that once I do figure it out, it will feel good and I can keep going with it. So for me, I can write anywhere I have my computer. I just need my laptop. Like, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. It does, like, I just need my laptop. And I think us teaching ourselves like learning how to trust ourselves instead of putting other people on pedestals and then being like, oh, they do it like this, they're so great, I should be able to do it like that. Like, call bullshit on that, because those people that do it that way and it works for them, it's because they failed finding other ways. You know what I mean? Like, that's how we do it. So I really, really want to encourage writers to know that if it calls to you, it's because it's meant for you. Like, I never get excited about wanting to learn about cars and mechanical things, or like, none of that gets me excited. Like, that's not meant for me. That's not calling me, right? Like, well, what are you jealous of? Like, follow your jealousy moments, because that's really your divine messaging of like what's for you. Go after what you want. And then really it is letting go of the timeline and the striving and the productivity of like what it's supposed to look like. That's just, I hated that part of it. Instead of feeling like I'm never going to get this done, I would imagine, I was like, I'm not going to, like, this isn't not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, that helped me more so than beating myself up.
And was there, I think of like Michelangelo and the, blocks that he could kind of see the statue before it became like, once you held the final piece, did it feel like it's always been? Like it was just waiting for you to actually put the work together to make it happen? Or was it not exactly like that creatively?
I guess I was just proud of myself. I know I already said that, but no, I don't remember feeling like, oh, here it's I didn't have the title until like I was at the very, very end when I finally got the title. Like, everything was pretty much done except the title. So I didn't know. I was still wondering if I was going to self-publish or if I was going to, like, I left all of that and I allowed it to happen as it happened. So when people were like, oh, you should do this and then you should do this, I was like, no, I'm just going to write it. And then I think there were a couple of times where I would stop and I would research different publishing or talk to different people, but I trusted the process. I think I just kept trusting the process. And I was like, if I'm supposed to write this, if it's supposed to be whatever it's supposed to be, I'm just going to keep doing it. It's that same thing of like surrendering to, okay, if this is what you want for me, then it'll end up happening. So delighted, but not surprised.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love that we're sort of ending on this through line of not only your book, but your life, of trusting the process. It feels like that is something that came in the beginning of your love story and your mothering story, and even the end days of your mom's departing days. If people want to find you, would it be on saraalvarado.com, or where is the best place to look up and find you?
Yeah, my website is a great place. And my book is at local bookstores and on Amazon. And I am on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm not nearly as much as I used to be. I don't write as much there as I used to. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find.
I saw on your website when I was looking and learning a little bit before this that you also visit book clubs.
Oh my God, it's so
Yeah.
fun. Yes, book clubs are like my most favorite.
Good.
Yeah. So if anyone does a book club, I will come and visit, whether it's virtual or I'll come and hang out and have wine with you, whatever.
Yeah, I love that. And we'll put all of these links in the show notes. Is there anything else that you want the listener to know or feel or be reminded of? Anything else that we haven't said?
Oh gosh, we talked a lot about all of the things, Betsy.
We did.
No, what my mom always wants me to remind people is not how important it is to love and cherish yourself. And the more we can learn to love ourselves, the easier it is for us to be in loving relationships with everybody. And it's really, really hard because we're really not taught to love ourselves. And so what are the little ways that we can do that and look in the mirror and wink at yourself, or, just treat yourself well, have pep talks, all of the things. So I'm going to end it with her advice because I love her advice and I love sharing her advice.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time and your vibe and your goodness in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
By Firelight is a Lit Path Studios production and is produced by Jamie Gale and Betsy Delzer. Music is by Legito Music and Pond 5. Thank you for being a part of our beautiful collection of stories.